And we came running over here closer to the place, and all of a sudden we saw the other explosion.
And we heard a big bang, and then we saw smoke coming out, and everybody started running out, and we saw the plane on the other side of the building, and there was smoke everywhere, and people are jumping out the windows. Over there, they're jumping out the windows, I guess because they're trying to save themselves. I don't know. And I don't know, everybody just doesn't know where to go. They won't.
Okay.
Well, obviously, we're trying to show you some photos and some interviews, and sometimes we have to re-rack things on the air.
Right, of course. And let's talk about some of the things that are halted for just a moment. We know all air traffic, coast to coast. The primaries in New York City, not today. Chicago Sears Tower closed down. International flights, of course, have been sent to either Canada or to other European countries. All Long Island Railroad traffic now ended. And of course, no one can fly in or out. No one was allowed into Manhattan this morning. There were people originally being allowed out.
Let me give you some facts, too, about the World Trade Center towers. They're 1,350 feet tall. Each has 21 or had 21,800 windows, 104 elevators, an acre of rentable space per floor, 10 million square feet of office space. It was dedicated in 1973. It is owned by the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. It is the home of the commodity exchanges, 2 major investment firms, banks, law firms, a hotel, and an underground shopping mall. All of that apparently destroyed.
And some, what may seem minor at the moment, television watching as we know it is going to be changed for a while. When you talk about all the satellite dishes for all of the major local networks were on top of the World Trade Center. And of course, antennas atop there are no more. So therefore, that's one of the reasons you're seeing us now on Comcast of New Jersey, Dish Network, DirecTV. Television watching is going to change because that's why so many stations are off the air.
All right, we just heard that the plane that we were telling you earlier about that crashed near Jenkinstown, Pennsylvania, a Boeing 767, was out of Newark Airport heading to San Francisco.
And again,
so again, Brenda, the tragic loss of life, and that was a United Airlines flight.
And again, to recount what the president had said, this is now a full-scale investigation. It was a terrorist attack, and to quote President Bush this morning, we will, quote, hunt down and find the folks who committed those acts.
You know, it seems that, Brenda, that what we're sensing here is that there's a coordinated attack by some terrorist organization against America, all across America. And this is something that is, as you just referred to, the president said that they will find and punish whoever is responsible. And I would imagine that finally this will be the impetus for all of the forces that we can muster, investigative as well as retaliatory, to find the people responsible for this and bring them to justice.
Exactly. And also, I think the one thing we haven't looked at, I mean, we are all in shock. So we've watched this morning. We want to get the reports on the air. But now it is time to think about casualties. Someone is beginning to estimate, and right now the estimate is casualties in the thousands.
It's got to be more than 50.
We just can't even begin to fathom.
It's hard to even guesstimate something like that.
We use the word horrible, and you hear it a lot, but this is indeed horrible this morning.
Finally, I think that the use of the word is appropriate to what has happened, not only here at the Pentagon, the various planes that had crashed. The earlier plane that hit I guess it was the North Tower first, apparently was somebody said it was a small jet, not a large passenger jet, and that the plane was waving its wings as if in celebration. When pilots fly, Brenda, when you want to wave at somebody, or if you want to indicate something of pleasure, you would rock your wings to acknowledge, just to celebrate. And apparently this plane, the smaller jet that hit first about 8:45, was doing that as it plunged into the upper stories of the World Trade Center.
Reaction is now coming in from around the world. Let's first listen to PLO leader Yasser Arafat.
First of all, I am offering my condolences, the condolences of the Palestinian people to the American President, President Bush, to his government, to the American people for this terrible act. We are completely shocked, unbelievable.
We have
Again, we're hearing that was PLO leader Yasser Arafat, reaction coming in from around the world. And now back to New York City.
We have Barbara Nevitz-Taylor on the line at Broome Street. She's our reporter down there. Barbara, what do you have for us?
Rowan, I have been literally on the scene all morning. Shortly after the first explosion, I went down to the World Trade Towers. I live in Greenwich Village, and I walked down. I was at Barclay and Greenwich, which is 1 block north of the World Trade Towers, where the World Trade Towers were, when we watched as parts of the building began to fall out. There were people 2 or 3 floors from the top of the building trying to wave for attention, trying to get help. There was a man at the west corner of the building waving a flag, and a helicopter came very close. This was after there had been 2 confirmed attacks, and I thought that it was a rescue helicopter. Optimistically, I thought it was a rescue helicopter. It may have been a 3rd attack, because at that point, police around me shouted, "Run, the building is collapsing." Well, actually, it wasn't collapsing, but a big chunk of the building at a lower point started to blow up, fell out, and the debris started raining on the street. People began at that point to run farther north. We got maybe 3 blocks away and looked back toward the building, and we noticed that people had begun to jump. First it was one person, then it was another, and we prayed that there wouldn't be any more. The people around me were groaning, "No, no, no," and then the bodies, people started flying from the windows. It was a choice of the flames, I guess, or jumping, and you didn't understand how this could be happening. It was really one of the worst things that I have ever seen. We started to move north, farther north yet again, and more debris was flying from the building. And as we got to about Worth Street, once again, I heard a police officer shout, "Oh no," and we looked back, and the North Tower of the World Trade Center was collapsing. In white smoke, dark smoke, sparkled. It was incredible. Again, people began to run for their lives because this debris was being showered all over the street. Rowan and Brenda, this has been a terrible, terrible morning. Every place I go, there are people who want to know if anybody got out of the buildings alive. People here in Lower Manhattan seem to have a friend or a relative, someone who has worked in the building, and they are desperately worried about them. But of course, we don't have those answers for them. We can only tell them to just please to be patient at this time.
You know,
Barbara,
I'm sorry, go ahead, Brenda.
Just to remind people, too, of what is inside the World Trade Center. I mean, so many tourists see it from afar. We often travel and see, but who are those people that are in the building?
These are New
what kinds of
Yorkers.
businesses?
These are New Yorkers who are in the World Trade Towers. There are some government offices. There are New York offices. These are people who go to work every morning. The subway runs underneath the World Trade Towers and empties into a plaza. People come up from the boroughs, from PATH, from New Jersey, from Metro North. They come to work. This was a working morning, and there were people going to work in the World Trade Towers. It was 5 to 9. The only thing we can hope is that the building wasn't full, but we do know that so many people have died, and it really is something that was awful to see.
Well, we're told, Barbara, that 50,000 people work in those 2 towers, and you can only assume the worst, not necessarily all. We were told earlier that we're a few in the lower floors that after the first plane hit, they all ran, or some ran out and were taken to hospitals, and a triage situation there.
Well, I'm actually here in Lower Manhattan with a young man who was very worried about his father. His father worked in the building and was in the elevator when the first attack occurred, and got down to the lower floor, and he is hoping that his father is at home right now. He said he talked to his father about 2 hours ago, and his father said that he was home. But so there are some people we do know who have gotten out, but it's been a terrifying morning for New Yorkers, and this was something that no one could A, ever imagine, or B, ever really want to see.
And of course, trying to get out to let someone know you're safe. We understand there were lines at pay telephones, 50 people deep, because of course no one could get out on a cell phone.
Well, all of the cell phones are jammed. I think that the law enforcement officials finally shut down the cell phones so that there is no cell phone access from here. I'm in a 7-Eleven and I've borrowed somebody's phone, and they're being very kind to let me use the phone at this point. But its communications from Lower Manhattan are very dicey at this point.
Well, certainly all cellular traffic and use has been very difficult from that area. You know, you brought up a very good point, Barbara, and that is the fact that most of us will probably know somebody who knows somebody, certainly, who worked in that area or who died or who was injured or hurt in some capacity. You know, the 6 degrees of separation is something that is very true. And with that many people, we'll all know somebody, probably personally, who experienced loss or injury.
Yes, Roland, that's correct. We are connected to each other by very thin strands, and when a life is interrupted, it really does affect many of us more than the immediate family. I think that anybody who has seen what happened this morning can never continue with their life in a way that they continued before. There will always be some fear.
You know, I think, Barbara, this is probably the first time in perhaps the history of our country, with the possible exception of the attack on Pearl Harbor, that we do not feel safe anymore. We are vulnerable.
And of course, to add to that, just to insert here, the borders have now been closed between the United States and Canada. The border has been shut down.
I must tell you, Brenda and Roland, that people are crying in the streets, and when I stop them to say, "Are you okay? Is there anything that we can do for you?" they say, "No, I am just terrified. I am just scared." These are people who are not necessarily connected by that 6 degree of separation, but feel the human connection. And for
I think we just lost
Barbara. I think we lost Barbara on her.
Of course, communication is so difficult, even as we mentioned with the television signals. The way you watch television, you will not be able to watch any station you want because the satellite dishes were atop the World Trade Center.
The towers themselves. So there's a difference between broadcasting and television. Mm-hmm. The broadcast signal is one that, by definition, it's broad. It goes out in a 360-degree radius, and you can tune it in with an antenna on your television set, rabbit ears or something like that. And then, of course, in recent years, you have now your cable systems. In fact, we are being seen on Comcast cable now, and that's why you're picking up our signal, because of the cable system. It's not broadcast. So broadcasting has become just television because of the satellite dishes, and we're also seen on Dish Network and on DirecTV.
Frank Uciardo, who first took refuge from the debris in a church, but now is across from City Hall. Our own reporter, Frank Uciardo. Now, Frank is on the line again. Frank, I understand you have someone who is a witness to what happened this morning.
Yeah, one of the many people who were actually working downtown here when this all started to happen earlier. I'm standing with a Mr. Hank Harvey. He's the building manager of 250 Broadway. Hank, exactly what did you see? Well, I was upstairs on one of the balconies watching the two towers burn, and the left tower, the south tower, I actually said to the guy standing next to me, who happens to be standing next to me right now, I'm worried about the integrity of the upper floors because of the damage. With that, I didn't have the words out of my mouth, and it came down. It was like something from TV when you see them implode the stadium. When they plan it, it started falling straight down, then it leaned to the east, and the next thing was a cloud of smoke. I ran downstairs to the next floor, got all the people from my office. I said, let's get the hell out of here. That's Hank Harvey. He's the business manager of the building at 250 Broadway, which is right across from City Hall here. We're standing right at the corner of the WWOR building right now. And as we look southward towards the World Trade Centers, you can barely see a half a block, and all you can see is black and white smoke. You have about 20 fire trucks. It seems to be a staging area that is setting up right around City Hall here. And we understand that they're going to try to start to evacuate people who are being treated at the scene by the base of the World Trade Centers. They're going to try to walk them out of there because they can't get a lot of emergency vehicles down into that area because of a lot of the fallen debris.
All right, Frank, let me just interrupt you for a quick second here to tell you that what we're hearing now from the Associated Press is that thousands of Palestinians celebrated today's terror attack in the United States, chanting, "God is great," and distributing candy to passersby, even as their leader Yasser Arafat said that he was horrified. The U.S. government has become increasingly unpopular in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip because of this past year of Israeli-Palestinian fighting, with many Palestinians accusing Washington of siding with Israel. In the West Bank town, Brenda, of Nablus, about 3,000 people poured into the street shortly after the attacks were broadcast worldwide, and they were celebrating.
And just to recap, too, to give some people some sort of time frame, around 8:45, the first plane crashed into one of the towers of the World Trade Center. Around 9 o'clock was the second plane crash. Sometime later, the Pentagon was also attacked. And then, of course, we heard later, still in Pittsburgh, the United Airlines plane crashed, and that was north of Somerset County Airport. Now, that was a Boeing 757 en route from Newark to New Jersey to San Francisco. And
we have some tape, Brenda, of what we were talking about a minute ago, of Palestinians celebrating over in the Middle East.
And you're right, just as the PLO leader Yasser Arafat had come on declaring his sadness at this day, at what had happened in this country, and now to see signs of celebration.
It's a shame that children have smiles on their faces when they really don't understand the tragedy that has gone on, the number of lives that have been lost, and the repercussions that will affect not only their lives, but their children's lives as the world tries to understand this kind of hate.
And again, the entire world is watching the United States react to a situation that is just so unfamiliar to us. We're not used to walking the streets in fear. We're not used to having to run for our lives and debris falling down from buildings and bombs going off. That is just something we are unaccustomed to.
No, we have felt safe in this country for a good many decades. And now I think for the first time, we're not going to feel safe anymore. And it will affect all of our lives because it will affect certainly air traffic. And how with all of the security measures in place in various airports around the country, particularly Boston, where the American Airlines plane was that just you saw hit the World Trade Center there, where it was hijacked from. How did they get on board? How did they overpower the pilot? Did they have a pilot that flew it directly into that? I mean, there's just so many unanswered questions that will take literally months to sort out.
And of course, the emotions. We saw the earlier pictures of people walking around just in shock, disheveled, and of course, many of them, as Barbara described, seeing bodies, seeing people jump out of windows, seeing that kind of debris fall down upon people, seeing bodies. We mentioned one of the quotes came from the Associated Press. People were just in shock. The cloud of smoke, seeing bodies laying on the street, seeing clothes, bags, and papers. The terrorist attacks in Manhattan have so far shut down subway lines, crippled cellular phone service, forced the evacuations from Wall Street to the United Nations.
The mayor closed Lower Manhattan to make way for emergency vehicles. You know, thousands of people left by just walking across the Brooklyn Bridge or walking north of Canal. At one point, the mayor said, if you're south of Canal, walk, get out. The primary election, which was to be today, was called off. And as we've been telling you, airports closed, trading on Wall Street, that's suspended. The UN building evacuated. Offices throughout Manhattan closed. And children kept in schools because their parents could not get to them.
Of course. And of course, in other parts of the country, the Chicago Sears Tower closed down. It is just an
all in
incredible
anticipation. Air traffic throughout the United States, literally throughout the world. Planes coming into the United States have been diverted to Canada or were turned back to Europe.
And of course, to close the borders between the United States, the New York state line, and Canada, that border closed. The U.S. on a state of emergency. The president having been quoted as saying, we will get the people who are behind this terrorist attack.
You know, Barbara Nevins-Taylor told us a bit ago that she lives in Greenwich Village and walked down toward the World Trade Center as soon as she heard the explosion. We have her back on the phone now. Barbara, we're glad that you're safe. What do you see now? What can you report to us?
Right now, there's an eerie stillness in Lower Manhattan. People are walking north. The police have below Canal Street cordoned off, so it's impossible to get close to the towers, and really, I don't think anybody would want to except to see if they know if there are any survivors. But it is very smoky north of Canal Street. It's very quiet. People are now walking rather than running as they had been just an hour ago, because that's when the buildings were still collapsing. And they're walking quietly. They're subdued. They can't believe that this has happened. And I think that really is incredibly significant, because most New Yorkers, most Americans believe that we are secure in our own beds. And literally, the World Trade Towers, while not being a bed, was part of our home life. It was an office to 50,000 people.
It also contains a hotel, Barbara.
That's true. That's true, Roland. It also contains many shops, many fast food restaurants where people were undoubtedly having breakfast when the first plane hit. The timing certainly was well planned. You figure 8:45 on a Tuesday morning? Yep. You know that people have to be going to work, and it is maximum damage because people are coming into the towers through the subway systems that run underneath. And most people get to their desks by 9 o'clock.
And we wanted to tell you, too, just the United Airlines flight that was en route from Newark to San Francisco was flight number 93. We want to just get that information out as soon as possible to people.
I'm glad you're saying that, Brenda, because people are coming up to me in the street and asking which flight was it. Because once again, people have relatives who were on that plane. A young woman said, I think my dad was flying this morning. Do you know what plane it was?
Boeing 757 en route, Newark to San Francisco, and that was flight number 93. That's the one that crashed outside of Pittsburgh. That was not the
one that went into
the
World Trade Center, Barbara. That one apparently was hijacked out of Boston, and it was a flight that was going to Los Angeles, but diverted by the hijackers into the New York airspace and then into the World Trade Center.
Well, one of the things that we should talk about this morning is the response of the New York City Police Department on the ground. They were here very quickly. They were working with the FBI. I stood with them on the sidewalk. Unfortunately, many of them were watching as helplessly as I was, as we watched people jump from the building, as we watched what appeared to be a helicopter coming perilously close to the building. And I don't know if that helicopter ignited yet another fire in the World Trade Tower that precipitated a huge chunk of it dropping before about 45 minutes before the final collapse. But the police were confounded. They were mobilized very, very quickly. They were on the ground. They were trying to cordon off the area. They were very kind to people who were terrified and running away from the scene. But it was a situation where they were helpless to do anything about a building that was bombed 110 stories up.
And, of course, this is what they've all trained for. And there was one spokesman who was in Denver, for instance, with emergency preparedness officials who said, quote, I don't think there's any place in America right now that's not at risk.
Well, clearly, I think that's correct. If terrorists can so brazenly attack the symbols of our glory, our power, our pleasure, the World Trade Towers, they can hit any place in America, but this is something that obviously was an irresistible target. And one of the things that we have to remember is that the New York City Police Department and the New York City FBI have been training in terrorist drills and terrorist disasters for years. This is something that is literally their worst nightmare. You know, we use words like nightmare and horrible and horrific, but those words apply here. We overuse them in so many other situations, but this is the time when the words actually apply, when they're not cliches. But nonetheless, the law enforcement officials have been training for terrorist attacks, but I don't think that they could have anticipated the swiftness of these attacks, and certainly not the rapid succession. I heard the first explosion from my home, and then, instantly heard that there was an explosion at the World Trade Towers, then instantly heard that a plane had flown into the World Trade Tower. And then as I was getting ready to rush out, to go down as far as I could get to see what was actually going on, the second plane attack occurred. And I don't think anybody here on the ground could have anticipated that, even the most sophisticated law enforcement officials, and clearly they didn't.
Barbara, they've been training, as you suggested, for many, many years, ever since 1993, of course, and the terrorist attack on the World Trade Center at that time with the bomb down in the parking garage. And they've had
Ronald, I'm so sorry to cut you off, but another plane down. United Airlines Flight 175, Boston to L.A. Yet another plane has gone down. We just got that word in.
Oh, my God. Barbara, did you hear that?
Yes, I did. And once again, this is something that who could have anticipated the massive, widespread attack? I think that while law enforcement officials were preparing for attacks on New York, they were preparing for what they called the attacks on the signature buildings. The World Trade Towers were part of that signature group. But what they've done in Lower Manhattan is to literally make a bunker out of the federal courthouses, the federal detention center where a number of alleged and convicted Arab terrorists are being held, City Hall, the New York City Police Department. The ATF has an office in one of the buildings in the World Trade Center complex. The ATF is the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Agency, which is responsible for investigating firearms and explosive disasters.
Barbara, let me interrupt you. But,
I'm sure there were people there who were at work. Now, their building is not in the, their offices are not in the main tower.
Right, there's a lot of collateral damage, Barbara, but we have to cut you off for just a quick second here. But do stay with us so we will continue to get reports from you from Lower Manhattan.
Precautions taken in various U.S. states in the wake of the terrorist attacks. One of the things I just wanted to mention, we were talking about a state of alert countrywide. Heightened security went into effect at government and corporate offices, at the Army's main germ warfare defense laboratory in Frederick, Maryland, city offices in Colorado, oil refineries in Louisiana.
When we have Frank Uciardo back on the phone with us, Brenda, with some New York City officials. Frank, go ahead.
That's right. I'm standing here right now just off Broadway by City Hall with Michael Hess, who is the city's corporation counsel. Mr. Hess, you were trapped in, I believe, 7 World Trade Center. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, I was. I was up in the Emergency Management Center on the 23rd floor, and when all the power went out in the building, another gentleman and I walked down to the 8th floor where there was an explosion, and we've been trapped on the 8th floor with smoke, thick smoke all around us for about an hour and a half. But the New York Fire Department, as terrific as they are, just came and got us out.
Why did you happen to be at that particular place when the explosions took place?
Well, the Emergency Management Center is where city officials go when there is any emergency such as this one.
How do you feel that the OME, the Emergency Management, is going to be handling the situation? It seems like they're still trying to arrange triage areas and areas of command and setup. Where will they be now?
I don't know where the centers will be, but obviously the mayor and Commissioner Shira of OEM are watching the situation carefully, taking all the right moves, and everything's under control.
Where is the mayor located now?
I don't know myself. As I say, I was trapped in 7 World Trade Center for the last hour and a half.
Thank you very much. That's Michael Hess. He is the City Corporation Counsel who was trapped over by 7 World Trade Center. This is Frank Uciardo reporting live from Lower Broadway, right down the block from City Hall.
All right, Frank, stay with us on the phone here for a quick second, if you would, please. I know you just finished talking with the city officials there. What else have you learned in the past half hour since we last talked with you about the mood, the feeling, the sense down there in Lower Manhattan?
There is a sense of surrealness. People are still not believing what they are seeing before their eyes, particularly among a lot of the emergency personnel, who are a lot of them who are first responders. They were just covered like in this white, thick soot dust, like it was baked onto them. They were dusting themselves off. They were being treated by other medics and paramedics. These were the people that first got down here before the second plane crashed into the other tower. So indeed, not only were the first responders people who were trying to help people who were trapped in the building, but many of themselves actually got caught when the second plane hit. So they had to be saved by other members of the services. So a lot of them were sitting on fire trucks, sitting in ambulances. They were stunned. They were grim. They were just shaking their heads. They did not believe what they had just beheld. And two police officers who were trapped after being trying to respond to the first incident said they just thank God that they were able to be extricated by some paramedics because they too were trapped. So it is a matter of the bravest being trapped along with all the other victims.
It is a time of shock. It is a time of worry for many. It is a time of fear, unfortunately. What you are seeing where we are broadcasting today, we are coming to you in many cases over Comcast cable, on Dish Network, and on DirecTV. You may or may not know that the television broadcast towers were situated on top of the World Trade Center, so many of the broadcast entities in New York City, with the exception of one that still remains on the Empire State Building, many of them will be off the air for a while until appropriate measures can be taken to move antennas, and I'm sure that's something that can be done with a matter of a few days to back to the Empire State Building so that people will get their broadcast again.
United Airlines says it's deeply concerned about a second flight, Boeing 767, headed from Boston to Los Angeles. That was flight number 175.